Hello and welcome to a conversation with the head of Phil Ferguson. This
Hello
part,
there. Doing all right?
I'm just doing just fine. So this is part of my interview series with skeptical activists and science communicators for my Skeptical Inquirer online column. So welcome, Phil's head. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Muchas gracias, señor.
Well, now that all of Phil is here, thanks for
Yay.
joining me, Phil.
My pleasure.
For those in the audience who do not know you, Phil has been an investment advisor for nearly 30 years and is the president of Polaris Financial Planning, LLC. Phil is also a longtime activist in the secular movement and the skeptical community, which is why he's here. He's been on the board of the Secular Student Alliance and
Mhm.
Atheist Alliance International and has made presentations at conferences, including the Amazing Meeting when that was still a thing, and Skepticon, I believe.
Yep.
His long-running podcast is oh so cleverly named The Phil Ferguson Show, and which has, I believe, a unique format. It's a mix of financial information plus topics of interest to skeptics.
Very good.
In the interest of transparency, I'm going to reveal that I was a guest on your show twice. So now that I have this platform, I'm returning the favor, but I get to ask all the questions. So let's start at the beginning. Your main job is not as a skeptic, it's a financial advisor. How'd you get into that field?
Um, wow. Uh, Going a way back machine. Yeah, Polaris Financial Planning, as you said, LLC. I started doing what I do basically 28, 29 years ago. So your 30 was well played. Um, but it goes back a little further when I got back from my first year of college. I came back home for the summer, and my dad did one of those dad things, and he said, "I want to sit you down, and I want to show you where all the money is at. Here's all the accounts in case something happens to me that you can manage the accounts and do the money and stuff like that." Because uh, he was correct,
How,
assuming
how,
that
how old how old were you?
I would have been 19, something like that.
My parents were not like that. They did not discuss
Well,
finances with the kids.
this
Never
was
did
not
bring it
discussed
up.
with the other kids. This was only discussed with me because he had decided that I was the one that had the aptitude for it. And so he wanted someone to know where everything was. And I remember growing up through high school, junior high even, where he would tell us about these stocks that he bought that doubled and tripled and went up 10 times. And he was convinced, and we were convinced that he was a great stock picker. And so when he said, "Hey, I want to show you where everything is," I was like, "Oh, yes. Now I get to see how it's done, how the secret sauce is made," right? Because he would get all these charts and this data, because it was really on the early age of computers and getting this kind of data online. So there were reports that would get mailed to you. And he had binders and he made graphs and charts and had different color pens and rulers, trying everything he could think of to find the best investments. And when I started calculating out all the good stuff and all the bad stuff, it turned out he wasn't doing so good.
Oh,
If the average market return is 10% a year, he was making 4 or 5% a year. And it was just crushing to me because I had this image of him being the stock picking genius and found out he would have been better off just investing in the market. And I thought to myself, what is the correct way to invest? How does one do it? And it set me on this life path. And after getting my master's in business and working a few years, I ended up in a company in Chicago. And so, anyway, so yeah, I started doing that, started studying, started researching and learning how it's done. I then, to start my business, I called the state of Illinois where I lived at the time and said, I want to become uh, a broker. I signed up to take the Series 65 exam. I passed. It was a pass or fail. I passed, set up my company, and voila. And I would get a client here, client there, friend of a friend, and did that. And for probably close to 2 decades, I generally had 2 to 3 jobs at a time. I worked for the man like everybody else, and, worked my way up, a promotion here, promotion there, job switch, et cetera, et cetera. My business was very slowly growing, and I DJ'd weddings for
Oh,
several
okay.
decades off and on. Loved that work. Absolutely phenomenal. And at some point about 10 years ago, the last job I had working for the man, I pissed somebody off. I have some guesses, but I don't know exactly who. But my immediate boss called me into a conference room and they had another employee join us. And already on the phone and the speakerphone in the center of the conference room table was the representative from HR at
Oh, that's never
corporate.
good. Never good.
Yep. And they just basically said, "You don't work here anymore. Here is a box. Put your shit in this box and we will check this box and then you will leave."
Accounts
So,
closed immediately, right? You
oh,
couldn't
oh yeah, I
access
went back to my
it.
computer and it was dead.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So they closed that off, and I got my personal belongings and left. And now all of a sudden I had more time to work on Polaris, and it started growing faster. So there's been no looking back, and I started marketing, advertising in the skeptic, atheist, humanist community, doing conferences, banners at conferences, tables at conferences, giving a talk,
So
like you
how did
mentioned.
you had so yeah, so how did you decide to go down that route? Yeah, that was my next question. How
Uh,
did you get into skepticism? So it was
Actually, it's
try to
funny
market
because,
yourself basically, and you knew some people in the organizations?
well, somewhere around 20 years ago, I had an assignment, a work assignment for the man in Arkansas. You may have heard of it. It's right below
Hmm.
Missouri.
Illinois. It's near Illinois.
It's not too close, but yeah, yeah, you got
Yeah,
the idea.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and I saw what America would be like and is like when it's run by Christianity, because Arkansas is one of those places, and it kind of scared the ever loving fuck out of me. Oh, am I allowed to swear, or do you got to ed that out?
Well, I'll put it this way: we had Pendulette. I had
Oh,
Pendulette,
okay, good.
and we didn't edit him.
So that scared me. And I started looking around. The first place I found was Americans United for the Separation of Church and State. And then I found, places like CFI and the Skeptical Inquirer magazine and FFRF and American Atheists and all kinds of other organizations. And I just joined them all and started going to conferences. And my business was still small, but it was growing. And so I would talk to organizers, particularly back then. There was a real big flurry of local and regional conferences, like maybe for Kansas or for the Midwest or for the Southeast. Um, and I would say, "Hey, do you need some money?" And they're like, "Well, yeah. What do you mean?" I said, "Well, just put my company on the back flap of the book for the conference, and I'll give you some money for that." And then some places were like, "We're looking for speakers too. Do you want to be a speaker?" Okay, sure. Um, one year I was at 14 different conferences around the United States.
Whoa.
And after I had done this for a year or two, one of the groups, I don't remember which one, sadly, came to me and said, "Would you like a table?" I'm like, "What does an investment guy do with a fucking table at a skeptics conference? That doesn't make any sense to me." And they're like, "Well, you're donating more than what the table fee is. We'll give you a table for free." So I said, "Okay." So I just would sit at this table. It was just a table, folding table, um, with a few cards on it and me behind it. And people would come by and go, "Well, what the fuck is a finance guy doing at a skeptics conference?" And so that became the conversation starter. And I would see people at conference after conference after conference, because some people also would do more than one a year. They'd do two or three or four a year. And I was at all of them, or many as I could go to, and started to develop friendships and relationships. And then every once in a while, someone would come up to me and they go, "Hey, I have an advisor now. And he just told me that I should go to his church." And I told him to fuck off. And now I need a new advisor. Would you ever tell me to go to church? And I go, "No." And they go, "Well, you're hired." And so I started getting more and more clients. Shortly after that, started a podcast, joined some friends on a podcast called The Pink Atheist, which was atheism and feminism. Had a great time there. Then I decided to go on my own, and I did Investing Skeptically podcast for a year or two. And around that time, um, my dad had passed away. And then after he passed away, I wanted to do a podcast again, but I didn't know what to call it. And a friend of mine came up with the name, The Phil Ferguson Show, because he's like Rush Limbaugh's called The Rush Limbaugh Show. And
That
a
is
lot of these
true.
really famous people just use their name. And the beautiful thing about using your name is that you can't ever really go off topic. If your podcast is about surfing and then you want to talk about electric cars, people get upset because your podcast is called Surfing America or something like that. So it's whatever the fuck I want to talk about. And it's often investments, how to invest, but in how mathematically investment scams work or in shitty investment products, how they work.
Yes, I've heard a lot of your
Yeah.
subjects on scams, how to avoid financial scams.
Yeah. And I thought after I did 20 or 30 shows, I would run out of material. I was wrong.
And you're up to 500 and
15, 517. I think I
geez,
just put out 517.
that was well beyond. A lot of people give up well
Oh,
before that number. That is amazing record.
it's something I've had many times. And at a few conferences, I actually did workshops and or presentations on how to do a podcast.
Uh,
And one of the things I would tell people is just start, right? Go ahead and suck. That's okay, but you gotta do something. You don't have to have the fancy background that I have. You don't have to have the fancy microphone that I have. You can get $100 microphone or a $50 microphone and be okay. It's not gonna.
mine's about $100, so
Yeah,
I'm gonna ask the viewers in the comments who sounds better. We'll see.
yeah. Well, I also now have a vocal processor that makes
Ooh.
the voice sound better and some expensive equipment. But you don't need to start there because the thing that I wanted to promote and endorse at these workshops that I did was we need more voices because there might be someone that listens to my show and go, I just don't like Phil Ferguson. Cool. Well, fuck off then. But there might be somebody else that does other content that's better than mine or presented in a different way or is relatable to the listener better than how I might relate to them. And so the more podcasts, the more YouTube channels, the more TikTok videos, the more blogs. I want someone when they look up evolution to be buried in podcasts put on by skeptics and atheists and scientists not finding the crap from the Discovery Institute. So I think that's my perspective. The more, the better.
That is a dream that I hope someday will come true, but right now it's very depressing. Like on any
Oh,
particular subject, TikTok, I'll get 20 videos on my stream a day from people channeling aliens, disclosures about to happen,
yeah,
or they're psychic, or they see ghosts, and I'll get one from somebody who's in the science realm. And the people who are doing that other crap have tens, if not hundreds of thousands of
right.
views and pluses, and the science people, 1,000 maybe if they're lucky. It's
Because
very
I've been doing the skeptic, humanist, atheist thing for close to 20 years. Um, it's worse. It's worse now than it was then. I never thought it would be worse than it was then. We were at the Kennedy Space Center where they launch people into space, right? It's called the Space Center. Uh, there's Blue Origin is there. SpaceX is there, NASA is there, all kinds of places and companies launch rockets there on a regular basis now. It's like a genuine space port. And we were actually in the tourist area looking at the Saturn V rocket. If you've never
yeah.
seen one of these things,
Uh,
absolutely staggering how big it is. And it's indoors, laid on its side, completely refurbished. And for me, it's like, I don't know if this is fair, but going to Mecca, you know, once in your lifetime, you got to go see the Saturn V rocket. It's extra special for me because my dad actually was an engineer on the second stage of the rocket. He wasn't in charge or managing anything, but who gives a shit? He helped build the Saturn V fucking rocket. And so and I'm almost welled up with tears. And we meet this nice couple. My wife and I were talking to them for a couple of minutes. And for just some reason out of the blue, the lady starts talking about how uh, global warming and global climate change is a hoax. I was like, what? we're in a room that's a temple to scientific achievement. This is the rocket that sent men to the moon. I was almost waiting for her to go, did we really?
Did we really? Yeah, I was thinking you were going to go down that path. She
I
didn't.
didn't go because as once she started talking about global warming denialism, I just smiled and nodded and really just kind of walked away, which was very rude of me, but
Mm.
that was probably nicer than what was going to happen next if I'd stayed. And that wasn't the place for the throwdown because I'm not going to change her mind. Uh,
So having your podcast, which is I think unique. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is there anybody else doing a financial skeptic podcast?
Not to my knowledge.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll say it's half atheism, half financial advice. Sometimes I'll say skepticism and investment scams. Sometimes I'll say it talks about religion, politics, and money, the three things you shouldn't discuss with your family.
Right, right, right.
And that
So,
seems
so,
to be a
so
favorite.
was this a conscious thing on your effort to get people who are interested in finances also to become skeptics and critical thinkers, or is it just you, so you decided to do it that way?
Primarily the latter. It's just what I wanted to talk about, and that was why I struggled with the name because before it was investing skeptically, so that's about investing.
Right.
But I wanted to talk about investment cons, ripoffs. I wanted to be able to do, as an example, a regular series that I do is called Church Money. And
I was I was on one of those episodes.
when people have to or choose to go to a church, because sometimes if there's a wedding or a funeral, wake, um, or to go fucking vote, you may be compelled to go into a church even if you don't really want to be there. You might also want to be there, but some churches, to try to have an air of openness, will leave their budget out on the table inside the hallway of the church. And so if you see one of those, you grab it, you scan it, and you send it to me. And what I'll do is I'll do kind of a financial analysis line by line. How much money are they making? Where does it come from? How much money are they spending? And where does it go? And I have finally found someone sent me what I'm going to call a unicorn, where it was a church where 10% of all the revenue they made in the year went out to actually helping people with pretty much no strings attached. But for the average church, they spend between 0 and 3% of all of the revenue helping people anywhere. It's not, they'll send a missionary to Haiti. And maybe that's helpful, maybe it's not. So, I'll have to decide if that counts or doesn't count. But actually helping in the local area, it just doesn't happen. It is expensive to run a church. You have a minister and an assistant minister and maybe a youth minister. And if you have a school, you might have teachers, you have a janitor, you have a boiler, you've got to replace the roof, you might have to repave the parking lot every 20 years. You've got to mow the property, you've got to wash the building, change the roof.
Mm-hmm.
There's all these expenses. It's very expensive. And the average church is not like a Joel Olstein church where the guy's making tens of millions of dollars. The average church is small and the pastor might be making 30 or 40 grand and he can get by on that because he gets free housing. Without the free housing, they couldn't get by. And these churches just do not have money. So when people talk about the average Christian donates 10%, first of all, that's way to fuck off. Um, if you take this data and sometimes it'll say how many members they have, and you apply the number of members times the national income average, and then look at how much money the church raises, it's around 2 or 3, 4% for most churches. The churches want you to give 10, but a lot of
Right.
people don't give anywhere close to 10 because it's
Mhm.
rough.
All right, let's switch topics. So,
Yeah.
occasionally, besides seeing you on the nicely named Phil Ferguson show, occasionally I'll get YouTube's pushed at me that show you as a co-host on call-in shows of various aspects in the humanist atheist community. I believe you've been on the AXP, the Atheist
Yep.
Experience.
Over the years, maybe 4 or 5 times. Yeah.
Have you been on the line any of those shows?
I have been on the line. Matter of fact, I think about 2 weeks ago, I was on the Hang Up with Matt Dillahunty, a
I
friend of
think that's
mine.
where I saw you last and decided I need to get you on the
Yeah.
show. Yeah.
And he had me on because he had been talking to people about tariffs. and how they work.
Yes.
And one of the first things that people will do as pushback, if you tell people they don't know how tariffs work, is they'll say, "Nuh-uh, you don't know how tariffs work." And if you don't really know them in detail, you just know that they're wrong, but you maybe don't have the words to explain in great detail how tariffs actually do work. So one of the subjects he wanted me to cover was going over how tariffs work. And I often try to give a nuanced perspective because sometimes it's not all this one way or all this other way. So in my 15-minute discussion on tariffs, I said, there is the possibility that you could convince me on a case by case basis that a country like the United States might be well served by putting a tariff on something. But it would generally come from the Congress, by the way. That's the first thing. And it would often phase in from 5 to 10 to 15 to 20% over a period of time, a couple of years. And then it would be at a high level for 3 to 5 to 10 years. And then it would go down after several years. And the goal of that tariff would be to encourage domestic industry to get into that business. So it's possible that tariffs could actually be done strategically and thoughtfully and for the benefit of the country. But that's not how they're being implemented. They're being used as a club to beat up on other countries. And if anyone hasn't seen the reactions that Canada has had, they are dramatic because he was going to put a tariff on Canada and then he didn't. And now, starting, I think yesterday, the March 4th, before we recorded this, he was going to put a new one on Canada and now he's delayed it for a month. And you might think, okay, well, he just used it to negotiate and he got what he wanted. It's no harm, right? He was a bully. He threatened somebody, got what he wanted. So America's better off, no harm, no foul. But Donald Trump, and I don't want to make this too political, but Donald Trump has forever changed how Canadians view the United States of America. And it takes real work to piss off the average Canadian. And they're fucking pissed off.
Their favorite word is, I just had a vacation in British Columbia, and their favorite word is sorry.
Sorry,
Sorry.
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 And their liquor stores started. They removed every liquor that came from America. And then the grocery stores started. And it wasn't even that the consumers said, well, I'm not going to buy American for a while. They yanked the shit out of the stores and sent it back. And now they're making trade agreements. Example, Canada made a trade agreement with Venezuela. All Canadian oranges and orange juice is now going to come from Venezuela, not Florida. That's a big deal for Florida. They just made another arrangement where all of their chocolates are now going to come from Europe, and you will no longer be able to find a Hershey bar anywhere in Canada. And that's going to be permanent. That's not going to change when Trump takes the 25% tariff back off because they've made alliances. Canada recently completed their pipeline to send their crude oil over to the Pacific coast through the Canadian Rockies. Hundreds of millions of dollars to build that thing. And America says, we're going to put a tariff on your oil. And Canada says, okay, we don't care. We're now going to ship it over to the Pacific Ocean. And they now have a deal to start selling some of it to Japan. If other countries around the world want to make the club smaller, make the teeth not as sharp for U.S. to be able to do this with tariffs, other countries can start working together and doing more business between each other and cut the United States out.
On that episode of the atheist experience of the line
Yeah.
with Matt, did you get any calls on these subjects, either
We
tariffs or
we
political?
did get one caller, and they started off by saying, I'm calling to educate you guys about how tariffs really work. Well, I didn't take that well in my head, but thankfully it was one of those rare moments I was able to say, no, wait. I think you are coming in a lot hotter than you probably mean to. So let me straw man your position. Are you saying that?
What, Steelman? You mean Steelman? You mean
Yes,
Steelman?
thank you. Thank you. I'm trying to make their argument or their point as strong as possible for their benefit. Because if they come in and say something stupid and I just slap them away or hang up on them, well, no one learns anything. So I asked him, I said, okay, look, before we get into what you can educate me on, and I don't want to brag about my experience and expertise in the area because we already covered that, which he maybe ignored. But I said, we talked about tariffs for 15 minutes. During that 15 minutes, what was it that we said that was wrong? And he said, well, you didn't say anything wrong. Okay. So what was said for 15 minutes about tariffs, maybe with a few exceptions, was generally correct and true. And he says, yes. And I go, okay, so what is it you want to talk about? And he said, well, you're missing a bigger part of the picture. And I said, okay, so I might have started with, hey, you guys did a great 15-minute discussion on this topic. Thumbs up. I think there might have been something you didn't consider. Instead of, I'm going to teach you how tariffs work. So he goes, okay, you're right, Phil. I could have phrased that better. So let me give you an example. And so he gives me an example of something. It was oil, which is a bad example because of a lot of complications. But something like steel, there's a 50% tariff on imported steel. American companies will start up and make more steel, which goes back to what you and I discussed, or what I explained while you politely listened. If a tariff is done strategically and longitudinally over time, they can work. But when the tariff is done by whimsy, by one person signing a letter, and poof, there's a tariff, no company on the face of the planet is going to come to America or is in America already that's going to spend $1 to $2 to $3 trillion to open up a brand new steel fabrication facility. They've
So
got to
what was
set
the caller's point? What does he
Well,
think you missed?
his point was, yeah, maybe there'd be a little pain, but then the American steel will come back, and we'll be able to make more and more of our own steel, and we'll make more money. And under that very thoughtful process that I talked about earlier, it's possible. It's possible. But again,
Yeah,
whimsy.
this is not that. This is not that.
Yeah, this is not that. This is saying I'm going to have a 30% tariff, and just like a day or two ago, I'm going to delay it for a month. I'm going to delay
So
it for a month.
did you convince the caller?
No, he ended up going off the rails, and we ended up disconnecting, hanging up, because that's the name of the show, the hang up.
That often happens.
But it was very frustrating because he lacked the ability to detail what he wanted to talk about. Came in a fashion that seemed very aggressive and like an attack. And every step I tried to steelman, strongman his arguments, so he had a fighting chance to make a point, because he might have brought up something that we didn't consider. And I welcome that, because every once in a while someone will say, "Oh, you're so smug because everything you think you know is right." I go, "Well, that's true. Do you actively know that you believe false things and you're okay with that?" They go, "Well, no, that's not what I mean." And I go, "Okay, well, I misinterpreted. What do you mean?" "Well, if I convinced you that you believed something that was wrong, what would you do?" I said, "Well, I'd spin on a dime and say I was wrong, and now I have better information, and my opinion has changed. But then I still think I'm true again. I still think I'm right again. But I have no shame admitting I'm wrong." Matter of fact, one of the things that ties directly to skepticism, many years ago, I learned how to do cold readings. And I used it 3 times. And all 3 times, it worked fucking phenomenally.
Where did you learn to do that? I know what it's about. I've read stuff on it.
Yep.
I've seen people talking about how it's done. I've even seen demonstrations. But if I tried
Yeah.
to do it, I don't do it well. How do
Um,
you learn to do it?
well, it was watching different YouTube videos, watching James Randi, actually talking to James Randi about it, uh, talking to some other people about it. So I did it 3 times and it worked, but it caused problems because after I did it and then explained to the people how the tricks work. One lady said, I understand. You don't want people to know you have a.
Oh, this is what happened when I interviewed Penn
Yeah.
and also Teller separately. I forget which one it was. I asked this question because I saw their show and they stand outside and they take questions from anyone who's leaving the audience as long as they want to ask them questions. It's very nice of them. And told me a lot of times people come up to them and say a particular, illusion they did in the show, just what you just said. No, come on, I know that you really have powers. Tell me where you got
Yeah.
these powers. Yeah, no, no, no. It was an illusion. I'm not going to tell. No, you have powers. That's blows my mind that people will not take it from the horse's mouth. So this happened to you specifically.
It happened 3 times. And I said, I'm done. I've never done it since. I'm never going to do it again. So don't even ask everybody. Thank you for
Ugh.
the confidence. But the first time was with a young lady that cut my hair. And I would listen to what she said and I would repeat just one quick antidote. For example, I would say, oh, I'm not really that good. It's not 100%. It's kind of fuzzy. I get these images. I'm giving myself room for error. And I see a letter. And I learned that if you pick B, C, or D, and then something like M, S, or T, you will have like a 97% chance of getting the first letter of the name of one of the 10 or 12 closest people in their life in
Oh,
the
well,
United
yeah.
States.
All right. Statistically, yes, of
Yeah,
course.
statistically. So I picked the letter B and the letter S because it was bullshit, right? So I had my own internal joke. And
I see a B or I see an S.
yeah, and it's a little fuzzy, so I can't quite tell if it's a B or an S. And she goes, Sarah. And I said, no, no, no. Do not tell me your friend's name. Do not tell me your friend's name. Hang on. I think I'm getting it. Okay. I'm getting Sarah. And
No,
she's like,
come
oh my
on.
God.
Come on.
I kid you not. And then another thing with cold reading is you assume who, and of course, by the way she reacted, it didn't seem like a sibling. It was someone tight, someone close to her, right? So I play off that. People often hang out with people in a similar social economic status. So she, as a stylist, cuts hair for a living, did a nice job, but didn't get a whole lot of pay. I'm assuming her friends are about her same age, live in the same community, have a similar lifestyle. And I happen to know that she had a shitty car. And so I said, I see something about your friend's car. And she goes, well, she does have a car. And I go, no, 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 don't tell me. Right. And then it would just disappear from her mind. And I said, is her car kind of cheap, run down, and crappy? And she's like, oh my God, how did you know? Because your car is cheap, run down, and crappy. Odds are your friend's got a crappy car too. And so when it was all done and I was explaining to her what I was doing, she was the one that said, I understand. You don't want
Wow.
people to know. So I accidentally reinforced her belief
Yeah.
in psychic powers by trying to show her it's a con. So that was heartbreaking.
What can we do? I mean, that's like the greatest example of how you should be able to teach somebody about it, and
Yeah.
it failed in the other direction.
Yeah. And
So,
I had one time I did it in front of a crowd of a couple hundred people. And I don't want to give you too many details. Like maybe in private, I'll tell you, but I ended up getting someone's boyfriend or girlfriend name just by luck, by getting the first letter. And it ended up being very traumatic and very harmful
oh
to
man.
the person who I was doing this for. And I said, I'm done. But it also dramatically changed my perspective on the average psychic, the one that has the little strip mall or the one that's at the fair. Maybe they're doing it for fun, but maybe they actually think that they're helping people.
Yeah.
There is that possibility because if I didn't actively know what I was doing, I
Right.
would have been tempted to go, damn,
Do you
I
know the
came across
story
that.
of Ray Hyman in this regard?
Yeah.
Right. Want to tell them that?
I don't remember it well enough to tell the
All right.
story.
Well, just I'll do it quickly.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, he when he was very young, I think in college possibly, like did palm reading, and he
Yeah.
was amazed that it was working out. And then it was his friend who said, "Why don't you just tell them the opposite of whatever you learned about it whenever you're looking at their palm?" And he said, "That's crazy. How would that work?" And then he did it, and they still thought he was right. about everything he said. So, that
Yeah.
a bell went off, and then he became one of the founders of the skeptical movement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did great work. Matter of fact, Polaris Financial Planning, by the way, is my business. Many years ago, I was the first person to fund an in-class packet that the James Randi Educational Foundation would supply to teachers to help them show them how the zodiac, how your sign, what is this?
Astrology. How
Astrology.
astrology
Thank
works.
you. How astrology works. And I underwrote that and provided the money for them to get the cards and
Very cool.
print up the documents and all that stuff. So it's been a great honor of mine
Very
to
cool.
participate in that kind of stuff over the years.
All right. So one more question on the whole skeptical thing. What's the last major thing that you found out you were wrong about and had to change your mind on that you recall?
Crypto. No, I'm kidding. That's a con. A long time ago, when there was a TV show on with Spock was doing the voiceovers before we had this guy saying, "I'm not saying it's aliens, but it's aliens."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
I watched
I used to watch that too.
In Search of, was that what it
Yep.
was?
Yep.
And I thought for sure if you put a razor blade inside of a pyramid, it would fucking get sharper.
There we go. They showed it happening all the
I
time. And
I was
how could you
convinced
dispute
of
that?
that there was something going on there, but
Okay, that's a good one.
have you seen Ancient Aliens lately?
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, yeah.
That show will make you objectively stupider with each
Right. Yeah.
episode. It is profoundly ignorant. It
There,
makes
there's
my
a
blood
whole
boil.
streaming station, Gaia, which is that's all it is about. It's about telling people all this nonsense. It's disturbing. Okay, we're well over time, Phil.
As always.
Unfortunately, I got to wrap it up here.
Yep.
So please tell the audience the best ways to follow your work.
So, of course, there is the podcast, The Phil Ferguson Show. I also have a YouTube channel, which is nascent, very small. Also, The Phil Ferguson Show. You can send me an email, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com. If, for example, you have a portfolio and you don't know if it's properly diversified, you can email me and I can respond back to you. Maybe you send me statements. And that first email, never send anything until you have confirmed that you've typed it correctly and actually reached me. If you want to include your phone number, that's cool. I'll call you, but don't send me statements. Don't send me your social security number. Don't send me your date of birth in the first email. Don't do any of that. Sometimes I'll just look at what you have and I can give you a couple of helpful suggestions, and you're the better for it. And it doesn't take me that much time. And every once in a while, someone has a really big portfolio that says, "Hey, I like what you're doing with your show. I liked how you gave me free information. I want to go ahead and hire you." That's fucking cool too. So it's all about helping people out. And one of my favorite things is to find people that have a brand new podcast that maybe has a couple hundred or only a couple of thousand viewers or listeners. And I have them on my show so that my viewers can learn about them and maybe kind of lift all boats philosophy. So
That's a
I
great
love what you're doing
philosophy.
here.
Great philosophy. All right. Well, thank you again so much for joining me today, Phil.
Grazie mille.
Prego.
Perfecto.